excited to see how that carries through today. But as Preet said, we have a very significant topic to talk about today, AI and design. So I'll welcome Matthew, Karan, and Kris to come on up and join me here, and we'll get started with some introductions for all of us. All right. We can grab a seat, get comfortable here. You can sit beside me. Super. So we will, as Preet said, we could talk all day about this topic, but I think what's so interesting about AI and design is they are both such significantly large domains, and Preet really has curated such a fantastic group of experts that each come from a different kind of, have their own origin story. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves to help contextualize our conversation and kind of the points of view that you're going to be seeing here today. So Karan, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Karan Walia. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Cluep. And so I invented a neural network back in 2009 when I was 19 that can detect how you feel on the internet. So, and how we commercialized it is we actually power all the creepy ads that you get on your smartphone. So if you tweet, I don't know what to eat for lunch today, you're going to see an ad from McDonald's. Or you take a picture and you're wearing running shoes, you start seeing ads from Nike. So we were the first in the world to do that. And the whole reason I started this company was so that I can develop an actionable AI model that can go and do things on the internet for you. I've been working on that for 14 years, and we're going to market with it this year. So that's a little bit about us.
Hi, I'm Matthew Richmond, and I want to start just by acknowledging what a wonderful room of humans this is. Absolutely fantastic. I love people over pixels. I'm going to steal people over pixels, because people over pixels really applies to this topic. So I'm a senior director of experience design at Adobe. I manage all the teams that work on all our pro products. So that's Creative Cloud as well as the Substance 3D tools. I have a very traditional design background. I'm an art school brat, so I started my career when the internet started. I was at Cooper Union. I got a very traditional print design education. You can use any color as long as it's red. You can use any font as long as it's Sabone. And then the internet kind of exploded in all of us at that point in time. I had studied photography, design, and architecture, so I have a very generalist design background. The internet exploded, and me and my friends started a design studio in New York in the late 90s called The Chopping Block, and we went 180 degrees from the education that we had. We did silly stuff. We did fun stuff. Looking back on it, a lot of what we were doing was animation, cartooning. We were doing style transfer. We were just taking any theme that we could find over the history and like putting that on the web and making a lot of websites that just did not look like the rest of the internet. And we rolled through, and the whole Flash era. We were making things and figuring out how to do stuff on the web at the same time that everybody else was. And Adobe swarmed New York in the mid-90s. They didn't have any tools to show, but they just wanted to know what we needed. And early on in my design career, the studio became very close with Adobe, and we ended up doing a lot of work with Adobe over the years. It was not a safe place to join at that point in time for designers in like the 2003, 2004. But over time, as the Macromedia acquisition came in and the design team grew, eventually when somebody jokingly said, "Do you ever want to work at Adobe?" I said, "I'm not moving to San Francisco." I said, I can stay in New York and do it? They said, yeah. So I joined Adobe 10 years ago. When I joined Adobe, we were doing AI when we started, and we can talk about that more as we move forward. But thank you again for the opportunity for us to be here. Thank
you, Matthew. Fantastic. Kris?
I don't have any typeface jokes or zingers for our talk today, but I'm sure we'll have some more. I'm Kris Woyzbun. Thank you for having me. I'm a tech entrepreneur. I am also a designer, a product designer. Currently, I'm building Gumption. We're building an AI-powered platform for everyday people who renovate. I'll talk a little bit more about where AI fits in. But my background is really user-centered. I've spent my career leading design teams and being a designer at IDEO, where I was there almost a decade. I worked as head of design at Essence, which is one of Canada's coolest luxury fashion e-commerce companies. And I also was at Google for many years, and I've also cut my teeth as an entrepreneur before in early days computer vision. So I've worn many hats as a designer, and I'm also originally from Toronto, so proud Canadian gal. But I have lived in California, in Palo Alto, for almost 19 years. So anyone wants tips on coming down to California, just holler.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kris. Wonderful. So you can already see the diversity of perspectives and the richness of this conversation. I will say we are going to take some time for questions at the end. So feel free to make notes for any questions I miss. And we'll make sure we have some time for that. So really in thinking about this, these domains and the convergence here, I think one of the things that's so interesting is, at least to start for our conversation, is to understand and to think about what are the implications and even tensions that are created as AI is impacting design at the level of us as designers. What does that mean, and what are you seeing in each of your kind of day-to-day for designers and how they work in their day-to-day and what that means for their creative process?
I can go first. So AI helps speed up design, and it makes it easier to design. So for example, like now you can like push a lot of the tedious tasks, like picking your colors, deciding which font to use, rounding corners, and setting up the grid to an AI, so that you can focus more on strategic design and the problem, spending more time with the users, and applying taste. And another example is using language models like ChatGPT and diffusion models like Adobe Firefly and Midjourney. They act as a design partner now. Like you don't have to be a solitary genius anymore on your own, and you can work with these AIs in tandem. And what's really neat is the way that we've deployed these AI models is in a way that they give you an extra set of hands instead of replacing your own hands. And that's what I really love about how companies are going upon deploying these models.
We're seeing the creative community wrap their head around generative AI and what this means, right? And where change is going to go. And we have a whole bunch of users and designers and creatives who are just leaning in, going all in, trying to figure out how to break it, how far they can push it, how much they can make things that look like their own. We have skeptics who are hesitant. They're interested in the technology, but they have lots of concerns for what that means to their intellectual property and where things are going to go. And then, we have a group of users who really don't know a lot about it, but they've just heard that they might not like it and it might not be good for them kind of in the long run. I've balanced my kind of like professional gig at Adobe by teaching. So I've been teaching in a graduate illustration program in New York for years. So I do all this stuff at Adobe where my teams are literally making this stuff and trying to figure out what is the right way and the proper way to introduce this. And then I go into a classroom of graduate illustration students where the stakes are explicitly very high for them, because like style transfer is a thing. Like the craft of illustration is essentially you are a style transfer machine. And we've had some really great conversations about where it's going and where they feel that they might be able to use this stuff in a way that it's not going to kind of take away the craft that they've spent years and years building up.
Yeah, just sort of building off what both of you are saying. I remember when I was at Google at the time and ChatGPT just came out with, what was the first model, GPT-3 or 3.5. And a bunch of design leaders that I know, we got on a Zoom call, and there's some folks from Adobe on that. And it was like everyone's wrapping their head around about how is this going to change our day-to-day as leaders leading teams who are doing design at these companies. And early on, I think a lot of people felt like they were cheating. going into an LLM and using it as your companion for copywriting, and then obviously generative AI with respect to sort of visual and now video manifestations. It's like, wait, am I cheating? But like to your point, Karan, I believe it's really enabling you to focus on the strategic, the intent, the vision, and less to do with the sort of task-oriented stuff that really just took so much time to accomplish very little. But I do realize that the tools right now that designers have in order to really design with AI are still quite complex. And so as professionals, we spend time learning prompt engineering. We learn how to just what to use when, at what point in our process. And so there's new learning curves that all of us are going through. I'm sure we'll talk about this at some point in the talk. But what I'm really focused is on our goal as design leaders is, now we have this like incredible technology that's new things are emerging on the day, on the hour, and understanding how that technology works is super important, because then when you have that knowledge, it allows you to understand, how could I apply that to the everyday user, which is what most of us spend our time with, because we're not putting these tools in my mom's hand. We're not putting these tools in my cousin's hand. She's not a design or technical person. How are we leveraging AI in order to either democratize or enable these processes to be seamless and powerful and beautiful, without burdening people with learning how to use these other professional tools? So it's an exciting time, and it's definitely changing by the minute. And I'm so thrilled to be immersed in this space. It's been the most fun of my life.
You each touched on this idea of AI as this partner for designers, and especially as design leaders and working with folks that are maybe more junior designers, or folks that are kind of even on other teams starting to use AI as and the tools of AI. And Kris, you were saying it almost feels like cheating a little bit. How do you go about navigating that tension of, this is my job, but these tools are helpful, so my job is being redefined, and how do you or how are you thinking about which parts of being a designer are strictly human, and which parts actually really make sense to outsource to this technological partner?
I mean, I think everybody has their own bar, right? And different industries and different specialties kind of have their own bar, right? Like in hindsight, the way the majority of the creative community met generative AI is probably not the best way to meet generative AI, right? It was immediately text to image, and you can explore and do things, but then there was the weight of did I make this? Like, can I share this? Like, can I post this to Instagram? Because I don't feel like I made this, right? Whereas, the creative process has always been, you explore a bunch of options, right? And then once you're gathering those options up, now it's like, how can I exploit the pieces of these things, right? So then I can start to refine them, and then I can turn it into something like I feel like I had, right? So for some users, the idea that, this technology is an amazing assistant for exploring, and we're seeing that a lot of people exploring. But as it goes to how can I start to refine this? Some people are using it traditionally, like they would do with just the reference materials that people had in their pasteboards and artboards, just so they can remember what a giraffe looks like sideways, and they're just kind of drawing along next to it. Whereas, designers that do production all day long, their bar's different. Their bar's I'm taking this all the way to the end, to the refine, because I just saved 4 hours by being able to leverage these tools, right? And that's what we're trying to figure out, where all this stuff is kind of netting out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that was beautifully put. And it allows you to explore new ideas that you wouldn't have otherwise, because of constraint of time. and which is, like I was saying, it helps speed up that process, and or otherwise would have taken way too long. And you have that time because you've been able to, you can now delegate a lot of the tedious work, like I was mentioning. So I'd agree to that.
As an aside, we always have to be careful at a big company like Adobe for when we talk to younger users. So a lot of times we bring in, like, our kids are interested in design. And I remember talking to this little gentleman, must be like 12 years old, and we were talking about this technology. We were like, what do you want? And he's like, well, I want to be able just to name 2 animals and have them combine those 2 animals. And everybody in the room was like, yeah, we want that too. Like, it sounds fun. It sounds like a really great way to be able to leverage this technology and play and just be surprised.
Sometimes, I think of in my work process and my design process, because I'm working on a tech software company, so the nuances of my workflow isn't so centered on product design all the time, but I think of using generative AI as I'm doing improv jazz. It's sort of like my riffing partner, where I sort of ask it something and it gives me feedback, and then I think back and, okay, how am I going to iterate on that? So it's like at IDEO, we'd have our team in a workspace and we're riffing together, and if you're working solo or just the 2 of you, I feel like it's a really great way to kind of fuel new ideas. But that being said, it's not perfect, but it makes it fun, where I can then say, I'm working on my data room for investors, and I'm like, how can I make it sound either more like me or more human and fun? And so I'll say, in the tone of Jon Favreau or something, and it's hilarious what it comes out with. I'm not going to use it, but it it makes that the tweaking kind of entertaining. But I think it allows us to think different, and allows us to sort of iterate more uniquely on the spot.
I love that, and I think this idea of using it as that, especially, I think many of us are working remote, or as leaders. I think Peter was even touching on it yesterday. It can get lonely, and so even to have AI as this partner, in a sense, to riff off of, as you're saying, and to be like, okay, what about this? What about this? Okay, give me some inspiration here. So I love that, Kris. Yeah, fantastic. So it's evident. We all knew this. AI is quickly reshaping our day-to-day for designers and day-to-day as design leaders. And as I think most, if not all of us here, as leaders and design leaders, we're not just, kind of overseeing our teams, but we have to be heads up in terms of anticipating what's coming for our team, for our department, for our organization, some of us entrepreneurs running businesses. Can you talk a little bit about how you're seeing the impacts of AI on design, but at more of that business, team, organizational level, and as leaders, what should we be anticipating? What should we be paying attention to?
Yeah, so I think maybe most of you know that at least within the Adobe, we've taken a fundamentally different tact on how we want to deploy generative AI. And it comes down to prioritizing, again, the people over the pixels, and leading with a data set that is commercially safe. And the way that this went down was actually, in hindsight, kind of magical, in the sense that, the design team within Adobe, we are designers, and we are simultaneously very important at times to inform the business, and we are simultaneously ignored because we have to go talk to real designers who don't work at Adobe. But what had happened is we sat down with leadership in the beginning, and of course our leadership was also very aware that the creative community are our users. How we do this is going to be very important. But there were lots of conversations between the senior leadership, engineering, the design team, for what we felt would be comfortable for creatives, right? Because the engineers just started leaning in, and we had new models were coming up all the time. And in hindsight, I am very proud kind of where we've gone and where we on the business side for how we believe we can kind of safely or more responsibly put this out in the world. We also, in 2019, started something called CAI, which is essentially the content authenticity initiative. And it happened in response to deepfakes and what we saw going on years ago. But we rolled with it. It was like the perfect foundation. It's something Adobe started. There's many, many more companies involved. And we were able to kind of graft into the tools that we were building a provenance record. So if you turn it on, or everything you generate in Firefly is actually checked against a centralized server, and you can validate that that artifact leveraged generative technology to be made. If you turn this on inside of Photoshop today, everything you make, a provenance trail exists, and you can verify that. So that's the kind of the foundation that we've put down on top of this. What's been fascinating is then as we work, with our users and our enterprise customers, all the signals kind of get crossed. Whereas, things that aren't really available for individual creatives, like training your own model around your own stuff, which every creative wants that. Oh, just my stuff. I can have it. My assistant just knows my style. All the things that they care about are also the things that the enterprise clients care about, but on a totally different level. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to protect, IP and enterprise, enterprise properties. But then the enterprise customers are we need to leverage this technology now so we can deploy things in larger at scale. So it's both sides of the business happening at once.
There's in the startup world, you hear a lot of discussion around the last several years have really been focused on AI at the foundational model layer, and with Anthropic and OpenAI and what Google and others have come out with their foundational models for LLM and other facets of Gen AI. But the next several years are really going to be focused on how is this technology really focused at the application layer? How is it applied to the products that we design and build every day? And it's this moment where, in Silicon Valley, for any of you who live there, and in other obviously parts of the world, but there's this really amazing energy of sharing knowledge depending on where you work. But you go to conferences like Hugging Face hosts these amazing conferences where just a bunch of people coming together to figure out what's possible. It just feels like anything can happen now. Everything is magic, and this technology can really enable anything to happen. Well, that's not necessarily true yet, but it's our responsibility, I think, as design leaders to for many years, it was well, you're a designer. You should understand the business side as well. You should understand the financial repercussions of the business and the viability and feasibility of what you're doing. Now extending into this new norm of AI, understanding the nuances of how that works and what's coming, I think will only serve you. It will just improve things in your career, and because this stuff is coming fast, and knowing how it works is just as important of how you apply it to the products that you're designing.
I really liked what you just said, and I want to build on that. I think it's very important. So we're about to experience one of the biggest shift in our daily routines, and that's not from interacting with technology differently every time we use a different device. And that's because before and currently we had to learn how to speak to a machine in its language, which was mostly through graphical user interfaces. But now we've managed to teach a machine how to understand instructions from our natural language, and so that it can go and carry out tasks for you. And that's a big shift. And as designers, like you were mentioning, I think we need to be mindful of this new and exciting shift from graphical user interfaces to intelligent user interfaces, thanks to generative and actionable AI. And we're going to be able to just text them, speak to them so that they can go and carry out a task for us in our digital and our primary world. So if you can't do something, you can manually go in and interact with the GUI, the buttons, the forms, the navigation menus, to get it to go and carry out a task for you. But that's going to become secondary. That's primary right now, but it's going to become secondary in most cases. Majority cases, it's going to completely disappear. And I think that's really important, and for us as designers to be really mindful of, like you were saying.
Yeah, we're super interested in that side of it because, as many of you know, design tools can be very complex to learn, specifically depending on at what point in your career the tools were at when you learned. And, we're trying to wrap our heads around the fact that, like, oh, we could probably start to leverage this stuff to make it easier to learn that and that, but we can't do it separately in that from that. And how does this stuff fall into place to start unifying, these interactions across all of these tools?
Well, and it's what's exciting is that, for many years, the biggest frustration, I think, for a lot of us was, you go into these teams where sometimes it's very engineering driven, and the technology often drives what the product should be, which is just nonsense. Like sitting with my mother-in-law with her MacBook Air, trying to tell her what a tab is in her Safari or Google Chrome, is just so frustrating. And she wants something intuitive. She wants something that works with the way that she thinks. And now we can do that. So knowing what's possible can allow us to truly be human-centered in the experiences that we design every day.
This is so interesting, and I think you're touching on something so core to being human, and I'll link back to our people over pixels kind of theme that we have, because it's been always this kind of dynamic between design and technology, and Kris, you just articulated it, what's possible technologically, engineers kind of defining, and then designers, following. And but Karan, as you explained, we're reaching kind of this tipping point where it's no longer us conforming to how machines need to be talked to. It's really flipping it, and they can understand us. And so as this is evolving at such a rapid pace, it's shaping consumer needs, maybe not needs, okay, expectations, how we interact, the interfaces, etc. So maybe we'll zoom out even one layer further, and I'm curious, again, from your perspectives, what are you anticipating, and what do you see as implications of AI on design at this societal, or maybe industry, but societal level in terms of, what's coming? And I would say in the next 5 years, but maybe the next 5 months with the pace of these changes, and what should we be kind of anticipating, or what are you seeing from your vantage points?
Do you remember I remember in God, what year was it when it was 2009, 8, 9, and 10, around there? And I was visiting Toronto, and my mom and I were meeting at somewhere on King Street, and we had to get somewhere really quickly. I pick up my phone, and I call an Uber, and at the time Uber was just black cars, but she'd never heard of it. She had no idea. And this car, this black Cadillac, shows up, and she looks at me and she's like, "Oh my God, you're doing well, you're successful." And, I didn't say anything because I thought, what a hoot. My mom is just feeling, luxurious, elevated. The person gave her water, and they were wearing, almost like a tuxedo. And that magic of just a car showing up and, driving us to, I didn't even say anything. It knew where we were going. So that magic was enabled from, a simple integration of technology in the iPhone that just unlocked all of this incredible innovation. And we are at that moment again. And so it's the magic that is going to come out of this is going to build new expectations for our users. And you look at Gen Pop, Gen Z, I think there's this assumption that the magic is already there. And so if you give them a crappy experience, they're just going to walk away because they assume that really anything is possible. So it's like wild stuff is going to happen, and the expectations are just going to grow even more, especially with generations that are just, they have so much tech affinity. It's just bananas. So it's the magic that we're creating. I don't think we're going to talk, like I say my startup is AI powered. I'm not going to tell that to the user, because it's going to be the underpinnings of everything that we build. So
because my background was, I spent a lot of time with students who usually they're hustling all the time. We had a design studio startup. We were hustling all the time. I feel a little bit of like it's my responsibility in a large corporation to like remind people that there's still a lot of people that are charging hourly, that are doing all of these things. And I say all the time, like, no feature should be any more important than like, getting your work done sooner, right? Making more money, or doing it in less time, right? So I think, at least for the next wave, it's like how can we take these things and start rolling them into like genuine utility that are unlocking those things for our users, right? I know tons of photographers who, they work their butts off and they know like, oh, I'm going to go do corporate headshots and I have 6 minutes to edit each of those shots. And if I don't do that, then at that point I'm losing money, right? So like, where does this stuff actually come down to the level of the independent, the small creatives and the small studios, to where they can then figure out how they're going to leverage that extra time that this is affording them to do bigger, better things?
Yeah. So I think we all agree that design solves problems for people, and we probably all agree that design evolves alongside technology. And the way we are, for example, designing and deploying this new actionable AI model in our industry, and I want to give a few examples, is traditionally, like, so our AI has served over 15 billion ads based on what consumers say, see, and hear on social media publicly. And how we're designing user experiences for an actionable AI model is, let's say I'm talking about a Greek salad on social media. Our AI will detect that you're excited about a Greek salad, but before showing you an ad creative, it will go on Instacart's website, add all the ingredients needed to make a Greek salad, add them to cart, and then our AI will go and showcase an ad in an entirely new ad format called actionable ads. This type of ad format didn't exist because we didn't have access to an AI agent in the past on a one-to-one level. So when a consumer clicks on that ad creative personalized for them, they now land on a personalized one-to-one website session that has the Greek salad added to their cart, which wasn't possible before. But if you're talking about a lasagna, you're going to get ingredients added to a lasagna to cart. So that's one of the ways we've designed user experiences within our industry, and are leveraging actionable AI models to make it easier for a consumer to not have to interact with the GUI when they land on a website on a smartphone, because it's still pretty challenging to use. Or through another way called mood check. I love this name. And what it does, exactly what it says, it goes and checks your mood on social media. If you're feeling sad or angry, it'll delay an ad so that we're not tapping into you and serving an ad creative when you're most vulnerable. So those are just some examples of like how we're leveraging actionable AI and designing user experiences for our clients.
there's this really cool paradigm shift happening with even like when we think about the touch points that we're creating for our users. If you're doing a service, if you're just creating an in-person experience, anything, there's all these new paradigm shifts about how information is interacting with us and how we're interacting back with it. And I think of like what you just talked about and like this terrifying moment of late night munchies and the ads that are going to be served to me. But like in what we're building, like we're putting everyday people in the driver's seat to really be empowered to design, plan and shop their renovation within minutes. But what we're excited about is obviously AI is allowing you to try on different spaces, like within the context of your space, instantly. And but the with Vision Pro and all this sort of headsets that are coming out, Samsung, I know, has one coming out in about a half a year. You're going to interact with information spatially differently. And I mean, what is it, like Minority Report or some of the older Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, like that's becoming our reality. And so one thing that you brought up is that there's like this subtle creepy factor that like the early experimental stuff is going to feel really weird because we're not used to it. So we're going to see a lot of creepy stuff out there. And so I hope that we just like a brainstorm, just get that crap out quickly and then like let's learn from it and move on. But we're going to see that for sure.
I'm fascinated to actually see where the voice only goes, like how far it goes, because I feel like designers and creatives are the ones that like can prove that like if humans could describe what they wanted, you actually wouldn't need designers to do all those things, right? And like if you want to just scoot it over like 8 pixels, like you should be able to just move it over by yourself 8 pixels versus trying to figure out how to instruct machines to do that. So like where the space, because we're working on spatial stuff too, like where all of this stuff actually lands as a usable set of tools versus like the kind of fictional, like this is what it could be, it's going to be fascinating.
Kris, you started to just touch on something, and it was brought up earlier too, but this idea of safety, this idea of this ad is too personalized, and it's actionable. Oh my goodness, how are you at the forefront of this AI? But it's such a hot topic within AI and has such significant implications for design too. This idea of trust and credibility and ethics and design ethics and AI ethics and that coming together. Can we talk about that a little bit, and how are you each navigating that? Who are the leaders? Who are you looking up to? What are the challenges there? What do we, especially as design leaders, how are you navigating some of that stuff?
Sure, I can go. So if we want creators to truly embrace the benefits of AI, I think we need to consider what's important to them. And I'll mention 3 things. And I think the first one we touched upon earlier, which is ethics. Like are these models obtaining consent prior to training on my data? Number 2 is quality. Is it producing rich, diverse, and unbiased outputs? And number 3 is control. So does this model still allow me to just jump in and take over control at any given moment of the process? I shouldn't have to worry about things like indemnification and whether I'm using a commercially safe AI model or not. And I think what Adobe Firefly is doing with content credentials, and we were talking about this prior to just jumping on this panel, I think it's really important, because I'm less worried about AI taking out jobs. I'm more worried about whether we can trust things on the internet or not. It's become impossible to distinguish between whether something's AI generated or human generated. And I was yelling at someone from Microsoft, their AI ethicist at Davos last year. I'm like, why aren't you guys watermarking every time a piece of content on social media that's been used and generated via DALL-E or ChatGPT is AI generated or not? That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, if there's a takeaway, would be our Chief Financial Officer, Dana Rao, who also has the title of Chief Trust Officer, presented to Congress. And you can search it. It's very easy to find online, just Adobe, Gen AI, Congress. It's a 5-page PDF, and I believe there's a video, and every creative should read it. It's exactly kind of, I think, what creatives want to hear. It talks about some of the stuff that we've put in place, but it also states very clearly the things that creatives would need from Congress to have more, to not be able to impersonate other artists. So that's one level. You also, at the end, I love what you just said, you kind of touched on the control throughout the whole thing. It was very calculated on the Photoshop team side when we were staring at Photoshop and being like, there's no way we're getting away with not putting the stuff into Photoshop and we need to do it the right way, we actually didn't lead with text to image for a really good reason. Like Firefly and other places out there, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, they were all doing text to image. And we kind of started with content-aware fill as kind of a proof point to like, no, how can we just go from that moment where you make a thing and then try to figure out what you do with it to being able to leverage it in the same way that we've been modifying things throughout the process inside of Photoshop. And it's been a ton of fun to kind of see how that goes down. And I think, we aspire, and a lot of people aspire to figure out the way to get this in not just our tools, but our process to where we do have the ability to kind of refine it along the way so that you do feel that sense of ownership and creativity. Like, only I could have given these instructions in this order to kind of come out at the end.
I am seeing a lot of just in my part of the world, like kind of activism that's like slightly more like punk rock in a designer sort of way, where friends that have the ability to actually build with this technology are doing some stuff to prove the point of how that data in the way it's being used to train models isn't necessarily isn't ethical. And a friend of mine, and he'll be okay that I'm calling it out, but he built a bot that he used a retrieval model with data from open source from design firms and design agencies within big management consulting firms, and essentially was a bot that you can build like a design sprint for a client within seconds, but it's retrieving data from actual, historic sprints that us as designers spent weeks, if not months on sometimes, to craft just like the right the right kind of process or workshop or whatever, or strategy. Anyway, so he built it and put it out there, and it's wild, like what you can come up with really quickly. And so his point was, look what I can do within seconds based on information that people have spent years and decades on. Is that right? And so it's a conversation that a lot of us are having. And you can look it up. It's HCD on the GPT store. But it's it is a constant conversation. I think that in government, there's obviously conversation around how they're protecting people and how like my mother-in-law, she's clicking stuff to accept things when she's going on websites. Like we're not reading those legal documents. No one's taking the time. So it's going to happen again. And so I think at the policy level, things definitely have to change, which I'm sure at Davos they've spent a lot of time talking about. It's not perfect, that's for sure.
We've touched on so many implications and impacts, and how the pace of all of this is moving so quickly. As an individual, just reflecting on just this conversation, let alone everything that we haven't touched on. It's exciting, but it feels overwhelming too. There's so much change. It's happening so quickly in roles as leaders where we're managing up, we're managing down, we're managing ourselves, we're working remote. Maybe we'll just end on kind of a practical note. Like, what is this? How do you navigate for yourself, like staying on top of the learning? How do you ensure that you're or how do you think about what's your mindset in terms of setting your teams up for success, setting yourself up for success? Any kind of tips or tricks as leaders for fellow leaders that way?
Sure. Yeah, literacy comes to mind. This is something we do a lot within our organizations, and we do it for our clients as well, which is keeping up to date what what the models are capable of, what their limitations are, because once you know that, then you have a good understanding of where do I need to step in as a human, what the machine's limitations are, and I feel like this training has really helped us internally and externally. Another one you touched upon was prompt engineering, just being able to. It's fascinating. Just like that's become a skill set. Like now you need AI strategists. Prompt engineering it's a skill. It's just how you speak to them and the way I'm even personally I would tweak the language I use within plugins in Figma, for example, when generating icons and when I want it to be rounded in a specific type of corner. So it's the way you give a prompt to a Gen AI model differs on the output as well. So constantly, training your team on it through AI literacy, I think that's very important. That's something that we do, and it's worked well so far.
Is this a formal kind of training, or is it you kind of leave it up to your team to, like, how do you go about AI literacy? What does that mean?
Yeah, so initially we just came up with it internally ourselves, informing and teaching. It all started with when a lot of our clients, this was a few years ago, wanted like a crash course on just like a 101 on AI. Like what does a neural net mean? What's an RNN? What's a CNN? And this is before the newer foundational models like diffusions and transformers had come along, and our clients just wanting a better understanding of how these models work, what they're capable of, how they're trained, how do we train them, what does an annotator do, and how does it even detect the things inside a picture? Like our clients were just very curious about how we do that, and so we started developing collateral and processes across our departments within our organization of an entire pipeline from the moment a neural net is trained, the data is collected, how we ensure it's not biased, all the way to when it classifies something. And so it started with that, and it's evolved now.
It's a faucet that just keeps going. I mean, I think it's nice that at least it was the design team's Slack channel on generative AI that has become really like the meeting point kind of for everybody, because there's just every 25 minutes there's something kind of net new in there. But then you have to you can't just look at you have to give yourself a time to go and look all that stuff, because it gets really overwhelming. I mean, I think we've been doing AI for over a decade. Like before it was generative AI, we were trying to figure these things out, right? And we had our awkward moments. We took our lumps. We realized, we need to talk to more people before we go and refine, the skin enhancement Lightroom plugins. We need to make sure, and we actually built an ethics council almost 8 or 9 years ago. We started with an ethics council. And then because of Gen AI, we have more teams kind of inside. We have the equality team now that's like part of the full stack that is Adobe Design. And every time the model gets updated, we have to run it through this process of harm and bias and really check to see like one little thing was turned over here, and now we need to go back and modify the data set. So I think kind of the scale, like at scale, it slows the thing down enough. And if we are paying attention and we're aware, and we continue to try to be respectful for how we're doing it, what's happening on the outside, there's a kind of filtering process that kind of comes through to the company to how we deploy it. But there are these like huge spikes in panic that happen once a week. Like, oh my God, nobody saw that one happen. Like, how are we going to get that one out the door? But we do also try to stop, as a group and just talk about what's happening and acknowledge the engineers that are really pushing forward, even though we know it's going to take a while for that to end up kind of in our tools.
I know we have 9 seconds left. Oh, no? Oh.
Preet said we have more time.
Like, there have been a lot of, like, some of you are like, what the heck is a neural network and a retrieval model and a foundational model and what's Anthropic? Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And when you're immersed in it day to day, like I have the privilege and also the exhaustion of having to be curious all the time, sitting on like weird open calls with NVIDIA, going to meetups with like Hugging Face, ex-Google, AI talks. Like I'm constantly curious and learning because they have to be. You don't have to do those things in order to understand. I honestly think asking those questions to just people you know that are more connected to it, and like there's some great Substack and newsletters that I read every day, and because there's just a lot, there's too much to know. But if you stand at 100-foot view and you just want to know the basics and the sort of the landscape, that information is out there. But there's plenty of options to go deep if you want to.
That's really helpful. Thank you. All right. I think we do have some time for some audience questions. I don't know if it's possible to get lights up a little bit. Maybe. All right. We have a keener here. I can repeat it. If the future of user interfaces, yeah, it is not chatbots, then what is it? All right, we're getting into prediction here.
This is a good question.
What is the future?
Smart assistants, but no, seriously, it's intelligent user interfaces. Like we're like I mentioned in earlier, we're going to move away from GUIs or reduce our dependence on GUIs, and have a conversational layer at least on top of them, so that an intelligent neural net can actually go and navigate the GUI on our behalf and carry out the tasks. And if we don't know how to and what the services are available to us, they'll be able to speak to us. Why chatbots? Why we're frustrated with them is because why we were frustrated with Siri and Alexa in the first place, and Bixby as well. Who's the same founder, by the way, Adam Chair. And that's because it was too early. Like the neural nets weren't capable of taking action. It was still options and menus, but we still had to go and do the thing, which was annoying. And so I think chatbots are going to have their time. It's coming now, and now that actionable AI is here, and as designers, we should continue developing user experiences and ensuring training a chatbot on actionable AI so it can go and carry out the task for you. So that's what my response would be.
We have this. It's a toy. It's like for I don't know, like kindergarten, grade 1, and it's this robot that sits on this almost. It has these mats of different almost journeys. It's sort of like in real life gamification with a robot, and my son has to prompt it with instructions on how to go from here to to the exit, to the pot of gold or whatever. And I watch him do it, and for him, he's trying to understand logic. He's trying to understand the first principles related to if he wants to become an engineer, just coding in general. And when I watch that, I think that's exactly how it feels to do some of the prompting right now in chatbots with LM. And it's frustrating because you're just you want to shake it, and it's like, don't you know that's the way I write? That's my tone. How come you don't know my tone anymore? And it's an interface unto itself, which is poorly designed, and it came after the technology. And it's like, oh, how can we, you see all the little features that change every day. Was this the right one? Was it worse? Was it the same? Give me another option. It's just as frustrating as learning how to use Photoshop for the first time, which is still super frustrating. Karan probably has a more futurist perspective on what it will look like, but certainly I think none of us who are connected to building these experiences will let that happen, because it's just If we're telling our children you have to become a professional prompt engineer, then yeah, I think that's silly.
My response is also a question, right? Do we think that we will be able to have one unified interface that just goes with us wherever we go, right? Even with prompt engineering, are we going to end up with 5 different languages? Is there going to be a dominant language? And my hope, as kind of a skeptic, right, is that the graphic user interface is going to come with it, right? I think what's most interesting and palatable is this idea that it's universal, meaning like I can learn a way to interact that will travel with me as I go from situation to situation and tool to tool. And my personal desire is then a graphical user interface will actually come along with that. So as you go from tool to tool and place to place, like, in the same way that you're personalizing or customizing how you wish to talk to machines, you're also starting to find the graphical user interface that you want to use with those machines. Whether or not it can go from Premiere to Photoshop, we'll figure that one out because that sounds extra complex. But maybe just the arrival of just a unified human-computer set of interactions.
Can we do one more question? All right, super. All right, front row. Got it right here.
On one hand, we have these conversation interfaces, revolution with spatial computing. So you're moving from simple designing workspaces. So it will be one of the biggest ones, simplifying interfacing to workspace.
Yeah, which industries do you think are going to be most well positioned? Yeah, or most affected? Okay, by AI and design. Oh, best suited.
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, and I'm going to be selfish and say that the worlds that I love right now are, I have children, so education I think actually will be very ripe for these types of experiences. Like, how do we, people don't learn from tests. It's just a crappy system. Memorization, it's just not. For most people, it's not the way that you actually learn. And so these new experiences that are going to be enabled from XR, enabled AI technology, will allow people to learn in a more of a choose your adventure format. It won't be prescribed, and so however that'll look will be wonderful. And then, of course, in the space where I work in renovation and construction, it's the most fragmented, complex, kind of traditional industries are just going to be disrupted a whole lot over the next 5 years because of the areas that you talked about.
Areas, I think, beyond flat design, right? Video, gaming, places like that. It's funny that you went to children because I think I love watching little kids talk and interact with machines the way that they just naturally think it should be. So of course, education, anything that's localizing or culturalizing, I also think is a big potential for this to make a short-term impact, right? Where there's already a massive amount of data, but for one reason or another, a group of individuals can't access it.
Which is travel and tourism, being able to go and experience a new country, city, just dialing in and take it even a notch further, which is once AI learns how to smell, which is right around the corner too.
Ew.
There you go. Then you can actually smell the environment that you just dialed into, or having an AI tutor, an AI doctor, an AI accountant within that environment is going to be very powerful. I think billions of people are going to get access to it very soon, and it's going to raise global equality, which I think is very exciting. That's right. One of my friends, his company out of LA is called Air, and they've managed to they're like the Beyond Meat of smell, and they managed to grow scent molecules, so you can order a perfume that smells like suede from them, and the goal is to eventually develop a device that you can carry around and store memories from your trips, and so that's coming right around the corner. It's called air.com.
The future's here. I have no doubt there's many, many more questions. I just want to say thank you so much, Kris, Matthew, Karan. This has been so fantastic. And Preet, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity and for having this conversation and for all of you being here. And please come find any of our panelists throughout the rest of the day to just dive deeper.
And thank you. That was fun.
Thank you so much.